Bonsoir, c'est Michael. Je suis de retour avec une autre vidéo walkthrough et aujourd'hui je voudrais vous présenter Les Polius. You might wonder why I just spoke French for the intro. That is, I want to show you a game that, at least until shortly, was only available in French. In the meantime, there is an English version called The Grizzled that is published by Cool Mini or Not. Les Polius means the bearded ones or the hairy ones. So the Grizzled is a proper translation, and that title is actually a nickname for French front soldiers during World War I. So that might give you a hint to the theme of the game. A few details first. The game is put out by a French company, Sweet November Games. It is by Fabien, Riffaud and Juan Rodriguez. It plays 2 to 5 players, ages 10 and up, in about 30 minutes. This game is a fully cooperative game set in World War I, but it's not your typical war game, at least you're not doing typical war gamey things. And the story is actually that up to 5 friends that grew up together and are now adults suddenly find them conscripted into the army to take part in World War I, and their only goal is to make it through alive and basically survive all the horrors, which of course they can only do by working together. And the question in the subtitle, L'amitié plus forte que la guerre, can be translated as friendship stronger than war, or can friendship be stronger than war? There is another notable thing about this game, and if you've heard anything about the game at all, you'll already know this, and that is that the artist Bernard Verhac, who worked under the pen name of Tinus, was unfortunately and tragically killed in January this year in the Charlie Hebdo shooting in Paris. So this is a very unique and interesting card game. Let me show you more by showing you a full 4-player game. Enjoy! Okay, I've set up the game for 4 players, and as always, let's take a brief look at the components first. In the middle we have 2 stacks of cards. These are the so-called trials. There are 25 cards, which is the recommended amount for a normal game, and they are on top of this peace card, which basically represents the armistice being signed. And the goal of the players is to go through all these cards, reveal the peace card, and then if that happens, if this card is revealed and they have no more cards in their hands, they've won the game. These cards represent the morale, and at the end of each round, cards will be moved from this deck over to here, so it becomes harder to actually hold out for peace. And as soon as all these cards are gone and this war memorial is revealed, the players have lost. Then over here we have some speech tokens for actually in a 4-player game. Over here we have a player aid, which is no longer entirely accurate because there has been a slight rule change, and this is from the first French printing, but if you get this game now, your player aid should be the correct one. And then finally each player has one of the Poilus or Grizzled, and each of them has a so-called good luck charm. For example, this one is the shell symbol. Also, each player received 3 support tokens. There are 4 different kinds. There's one with a single arrow to the left, one with an arrow to the right, one with 2 arrows to the left, and one with 2 arrows to the right. Each player received 1 each of the single arrows to the left and the right, and then a random one. The rules say that the most bearded player goes first, and we just decided that this will be the player who controls Gustave, and so he has the captain marker. And then we can already start the game. Now, in any given round, we go through 4 phases, and the first one is the preparation. Here, the mission leader has to decide the mission intensity, which represents the number of cards that everybody has to draw from this pile. And there's a special rule that the first mission of the game always has to have an intensity of at least 3, so why not go with that number so we can see where we stand. That means that each player will get 3 cards from the deck, and we hand them out one by one, starting with the mission leader. And then we're already into phase number 2, the mission itself, where we take turns, starting with the mission leader, and on each turn each player has to decide amongst 4 different actions. The possible actions are to play a trial card from the hand, to withdraw and play a support token, to use their good luck charm, or to give a speech, but for that you'd need to have a speech marker, and at the start of the game nobody has one. So the 4th option is not really an option for now. And since the goal of the game is to get rid of the cards in your hand, the normal action that you would take on your turn is to play a threat card from your hand. The thing is that the players cannot communicate to each other which cards they actually hold in their hands, which makes this playthrough rather interesting, because of course I have to know all the cards. But let's actually take a look at what the Gustav player has in his hand. Trial cards can either be so-called threats, which are these ones, and each card depicts at least 2 different threats. So for example, this threat here is Knight, and we also have the Whistle, which basically represents the start of an assault, and this one over here is Rain and a Whistle. And then we have these cards, Coup dur in the original version, which can be translated as Hard Knocks. And if you play such a card, it goes in front of your character. It gives you a negative ability, and if you have 4 of those cards in front of a single player, the players will also lose. So if you were to decide to play the Demoralized card, it would go in front of him, and that would give him a negative ability. If you would decide to play one of these threat cards, they would have to go here in the middle, the so-called no man's land. What the players are trying to do, that there will never be 3 of the same threat in the no man's land, because then the mission will be a failure. So for starters, let's actually decide that he plays this card into the no man's land, and the other 2 cards are of course kept in his hand. The next player, Gaston, has these 3 cards in his hand. So once again, 2 threats and a Hard Knock. This one's interesting because it's basically mutism, which means that he can no longer speak or communicate with the other players, which is basically a metagame effect. And of course its effect is not as grave as it would be otherwise in this playthrough. Now, no matter which card he plays, it won't make the situation worse, because he doesn't have a Knight card and he also doesn't have a Whistle. So he decides to play this one with a snow and a shell on it. And then the player controlling Charles already has some tough choices. He has a card with a Knight and the Whistle, which is an exact copy of the one we already have here. So playing this one would raise the threat of both Knight and the Whistle to 2. He has a card with a Rain and a shell. It would be the first Rain card, but the second shell. And then he has the same card, but with a trap symbol at the bottom, and which means that if he plays it, he would have immediately to draw and play another card from the stack. And if that card would be a 3rd shell, for example, the mission would be immediately over. So this one's a bit risky, and while he is not allowed to exactly mention which cards he has still in his hand to the others, they can still come up with a plan, and so he decides to play this one, and we'll see in a second why that is not as bad as it seems. The player who controls Felix decides not to play a card, but use another option instead, and that is he decides to use his Good Luck Charm. His Good Luck Charm is related to Knight, so he can flip his card over, indicating that his good luck is spent for now, but then discard 1 card from the no man's land that has Knight on it. And so he decides to discard this card, and cards that are discarded are entirely removed from the game. And so the threats of Knight and Whistle are not as bad as they were before. And back to Gustav. Gustav decides to play his Hard Knock card, which is demoralized, and the effect would be that in phase number 4, when the morale drops, it would drop by an additional card. And so that's his turn. Gaston decides to play this card, Rain and the Gas Mask, so no threats have gotten any worse. Charles still thinks that it's too risky to play the trap, so he decides to play this one. So now the Rain and the Shell are in danger of becoming a real threat. Now the Felix player has 1 Hard Knock, which is a traumatism, and it would go in front of him, but it would actually represent another Knight, so then we'd be back at 2 if he plays that one. This one is Happy Christmas, which is actually a good card, the only good card in the deck, which would allow him to remove 1 other Hard Knock from the game. So for example, that could be used for the Demoralized card. And finally, he has a card that he cannot play because it would be the 3rd Rain. So for now, he decides to play his Traumatism, bringing Knight up to 2. Now the Gustav player can't play his card because it would be the 3rd Rain. He could use his Good Luck, which shows Snow, to discard this card, but after a brief discussion with the other players, the result is that it wouldn't benefit them that much if this card were gone. Yes, they could play a 3rd shell maybe, but the problem is that there's simply too much rain, and that is their main problem. So he decides not to use his Good Luck, but since he can't play a card and he can't make a speech, he has to withdraw and give support. Now to indicate that he's withdrawn, he places his card, that would of course normally be in his hand, down next to his character, and then he has to choose one of his tokens and place it in secret. Looking at the support tokens, he has twice to the right, which would mean Charles, 1 to the left, and another one to the right. And basically by placing one of these tokens, and you have to do that face down, you indicate who you want to give your support to. And if a player receives more support than any other player, then he has a choice, if the mission is successful, and we hope that it will, of either removing 2 hard knock cards or recharge his good luck. And the thing is, the only player who has both used his good luck right now and has a hard knock in front of him is Felix. So to support Felix, our player would need to use a to the right token, because from him on the other end of the table he is to the right, of course. So these are still face down. He decided to select this one and it goes face down on his card. And now he's withdrawn, he can no longer take any actions, and it's the next player's turn. Gaston decides to play his hard knock. He's now mute, so he cannot communicate with other players, and he could not use any speeches if the players had already gotten some. Charles would be able to get rid of a rain card, and he decides to do that. He decides to discard this one. Then Felix is able to play an identical card. Gustav is already withdrawn. Gaston has to withdraw because he can no longer play any cards. The situation has changed a bit because now Charles also doesn't have his good luck anymore, but Felix is still a proper candidate. However, Gaston would need a 2 times token, either to the right or to the left, of course, to be actually able to support him. He's not lucky because he hasn't one of those. Now he has to decide whether it makes more sense to support Gustav, so he can get rid of his hard knock, or Charles, but he decides to support Charles, so he plays a token to the left. Then it's Charles. He cannot play his card. It would be the third shell, it would be the third rain, so no other options. He decides to withdraw. Of course he wants to support Felix, so he uses a token to the left. And now Felix has to decide whether it's worth to play the Merry Christmas card, and he actually decides to do so. So this card is removed from the game, and he decides to remove this one, so this one's also gone. And then it gets back to him, and now he also has to decide whom he wants to support. Looking at his options, he has a twice to the right token, and while he does not know what the other players did, he knows that he's probably a candidate for receiving the most support, and he knows, because each player started with 1 to the left and 1 to the right, that Gustav and Charles will be able to support him if they want. However, he's not sure whether Gaston was able, and so it would be dangerous to support either Gustav and Charles, because if he picks the wrong one and Gaston also supported them, then they would have to support and he would have to support, and then it would be a tie and nobody would get the support. So he thinks that by actually supporting Gaston, he should be on the safe side and he should actually be the one to get the most support. Okay, so everybody has successfully withdrawn, so the mission was a success. And since the mission was a success, we can discard the cards in No Man's Land and remove them from the game. Everybody keeps the cards they still have in their hand. The hard knocks that have been played also remain. And then we can move into phase number 3, support. Here, simply the tiles are revealed and assigned to the appropriate player. So the support moves to the left. This support moves twice to the right. This support moves to the right, which is actually over here. And this support moves to the left. So we can see we have a single player who has received the most support, so he can either recharge his good fortune or discard 2 hard knock cards. He decides to recharge his good fortune, and everybody keeps the tokens they received, so now they're not evenly distributed anymore. Okay, with the support being done, we can move into phase number 4, the morale drop. Here we count the number of cards that players still have in their hand, so that's 1, 2, but the morale always drops by a minimum of 3 cards, so we move 3 cards from the right to the left. Then, since we're still in the game, the mission leader advances to the next player in player order, and the former mission leader receives 1 speech token that he'll be able to use from now on. And then our new mute mission leader has to decide on the next mission's intensity. And since things are not too bad right now, he decides to go with 3 once more. Gaston decides to play this card, which is both Snow and Rain. Charles decides to play a hard knock card. That's another traumatism. So we're already at 2 snow. Felix plays this card. Gustav sees that snow is going to be a problem. And while he can use his good luck to discard the 1 snow card from the no man's land, he decides to do something else. He decides to actually use his speech token, so this one is discarded, removed from the game. And now he can call out any one of the 6 threats, and each other player can discard 1 card featuring that threat from the hand if they have one. Felix has a snow card, which also would have had a trap, so very good that this card is gone. Charles does not have a snow card in his hand. He cannot discard the traumatism because it's already been played, and Gaston can discard this card. Gaston is playing a second hard knock. He has now a phobia of shells, but since that is only the first shell altogether, we're still good. Charles also develops a phobia with a whistle symbol, but still that's the first one, we're still good. Felix now becomes, well, prideful, which means he cannot decide to withdraw until he's the last one to do so. Gustav plays this card, so it's the second rain and also the second whistle. Gaston has to withdraw. He has no cards to play and it doesn't make any sense to use his good luck charm. Now he would like to support Charles, but the problem is he only has twice to the right and 2 single ones to the right, and so he decides to play this one, of course face down, to support Felix. And now that he has withdrawn, the shell on his phobia actually does no longer count against the limits in the no man's land. So even if the other players played 2 shells into no man's land right now, that would still be fine. On top of being traumatized by snow and having phobia of the whistle that calls for the assaults, Charles is now also stubborn, which means he cannot withdraw if he has still 2 or more cards in his hand. Over to Felix. He could use his good luck charm to remove the knight card, but that doesn't seem of much use. Now he has the card that he cannot withdraw if he's not the last one to do so. However, if you don't have any cards in your hand, then you're allowed to withdraw whatever your hard knock cards actually say. So he's allowed to withdraw. He now only has to pick a proper support. Gustav has 3 cards remaining in his hand and they're all bad. So he can't or doesn't want to play any of them right now. He could withdraw, but then he'd still have 3 cards in his hand, which would of course count against the morale. So he decides to do something else first. He decides to use his good luck and remove this card. Not necessarily because of the snow, but the rain. Gaston is withdrawn. Charles decides to withdraw as well. And he picked a support token. So we're back with Gustav. Since all of his comrades have withdrawn, all the traumatisms and phobias are no longer relevant to what's happening on the mission. So this is basically everything there is. So he decides to play this card, which is horrible because it has all 6 threats on it. But we're still good. Everything is at 2 at most. And then it's still his turn, or his turn again. And now he decides to withdraw. Everybody has successfully withdrawn. The mission is a success, so these cards are discarded. And we can move over to the support. By the way, if the mission is a failure, the only thing that the player who got the most support can do is discard 1 hard knock card. So this is one of the good things if the mission is a success. The other thing is that actually, if the mission were a failure, that the cards from the no man's land would be shuffled back into the trial stack. But then, let's take a look at the support. Gaston supported twice to the right, so that goes over to Felix. Charles supported to the right, so Gaston. Felix supported to the right, so other side of the table. This goes to Charles. And Gustav supported twice to the right, so this one goes over to Charles. So Charles has received the most support. He can either flip up his card again or discard 2 hard knocks. Since 4 hard knocks is game over, he decides to get rid of 2. This one should definitely go, and then he decides to discard this phobia. Everybody keeps the support they received. Then the drop of the morale. 2 cards over here, 1 card over here, so 3, but that would have been the minimum anyway. Then the mission leader moves over here, and our former mission leader gets 1 speech token. Then we enter the next round and we have to prepare for the mission. Now you may always check how many cards are still left in any of these piles. So let's do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the question is, should we do a mission intensity of 1 or 2? If we take 2, then the Gustav player would end up with 4 cards, which might be too much. On the other hand, we would push through all the trials, but we probably won't win because all the cards in the hands still have to go. So let's actually be not too risky and only go with a mission intensity of 1. So everybody receives 1 card. And then it's Charles' turn to do something. Now he has 2 cards with a trap symbol in his hand. So now is a very good time to play one of those. And he decides to go with the one with the gas mag because the shell is over here on a phobia. So this one stays in his hand. He plays this to the no man's land. He has to play another card immediately. Okay, that's not too bad. We didn't double down on any of the threats. Felix doesn't like his card very much. The thing is, he could of course use his good luck charm, but that doesn't make any sense. We have no knight down here. He cannot actually withdraw if he still has a card in his hand because he has to be the last one to do so. So now he's also frantic or hectic, which means that when the mission starts, he draws an additional 2 cards to the ones he has to draw anyway. Gustav plays a phobia. Gaston has a speech, but he's mute, so he actually can't use it. Since he has a phobia of shells, and there's a shell out here, he decides to use his good luck charm to get rid of the shell card in the middle. The card that Charles has left in his hand is too risky to play, so he decides to withdraw and play a support token. Now the question is whom to support. The obvious choice would be Felix, since he has 3 hard knock cards. On the other hand, if Gaston doesn't get rid of his mutism, then this speech token will never be of any use. But he actually decides to support Felix. Felix withdraws, again, despite the fact that he has this card, he's allowed to because he has no more cards in his hand. And he plays support. Gustav plays this card in the middle, so we are 2 rain. Gaston has this card in his hand. The shell and the snow are not the problem, but the trap card is. Because if he plays it and it reveals another shell or another gas mask, because we have 1 here and 1 up here on the phobia, or another rain, then the mission is a failure, so he decides to withdraw. And Gustav decides to withdraw as well. So the mission is once more a success. These 2 cards are discarded. Support. Gaston supported to the right. Charles supported to the left. Felix supported twice to the right. So we have Gaston. Right now it's very distributed. So let's see what Gustav did. He supported to the left. So actually Gaston receives the support. The choice is easy. He wants to get rid of 2 hard knock cards. That means of course that Felix still has 3 of those. Everybody gets the support they received. Then we have 3 cards in hand. So morale drops by 3. So we're now back at 5. Mission leader rotates. Former mission leader gets a speech token. And then we can decide on the intensity. Since we have 3 cards evenly distributed and 2 speeches, we decide to go for the win and do a mission intensity of 2. Now Felix would have to draw 2 extra cards because he's frantic or hectic, but there are no cards. So he's lucky. Felix received a 4th hard knock card, and the thing is, you don't immediately lose the game if somebody gets a 4th hard knock card. You lose the game if after the support somebody still has 4 hard knock cards. The problem is he could play it now and hope that he receives the support and can get rid of 2, but we don't know how the tokens are distributed. So for example, Gustav only has 1, and so it's a bit too risky probably. He decides to do something that would normally be very risky because it's night. We have another knight up here and there's a trap symbol, but the good thing is there are no more cards on here, so the trap actually doesn't do anything. Gustav now becomes clumsy. That means whenever he withdraws, he has to draw and play 1 card, again, I think we're lucky in this regard. Gaston decides to use his speech. And after a bit of discussion back and forth, revealing some details but not too much about their respective hands, he decides to call out Rain. And so Gustave can get rid of the last card in his hand, and also Charles can discard a Rain card. Charles develops another hard knock. He's now weak. He keeps other players from withdrawing if they still have cards in their hand. So if he is not withdrawn yet, other players can't withdraw because basically they have to protect him. Felix doesn't want to play his fourth hard knock card. He cannot withdraw, both because he is too proud to do so and also because Charles is weak. So the only thing that he can do that makes sense is use his good luck charm and get rid of this knight card in the middle. Gustave wants to withdraw, he can do so. He doesn't have any cards left, so he's not bound by Charles' weakness. He only has one support token, so he plays it. Gaston cannot withdraw, so he has to play one card. It's this one, but once again we're lucky, the trap is ignored. Charles decides to withdraw, so his weakness doesn't affect the other players anymore. Also, there aren't that many meaningful things he has left to do. He could give a speech, but there's only 2 cards in play. And now Felix basically doesn't have another choice. He cannot withdraw because he's still proud, and there's still other players that haven't withdrawn yet, so there's no choice. He has to play his last card, the fourth hard knock. On top of everything else that is going on, Felix is now also an egoist, so all the support he plays would always be redirected towards him. But this is actually great because we need him to be the one to receive the most support, so once again we're very lucky. And then Gaston plays his last card. We're still fine. Then we're back to Felix. He can now withdraw, and no matter which token he plays, he'll always support himself. And then finally Gaston can also withdraw and play a support. So everybody has successfully withdrawn. The mission is a success. These cards get removed from the game, and we take a look at the support. Charles supported to the left, so Felix. Felix always has to support himself. Gustave supports to the right, so that's also Felix. And finally Gaston supports twice to the right, so Felix got the unanimous support of his comrades, meaning that he can discard 2 of the hard knock cards. And then as we enter into the morale drop phase, we see that the peace card is visible, and since also no player has any cards left in their hands, we win the game. And that was one full 4-player game of Les Polius, or the Grizzled. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this overview of Les Polius. First of all, I was very lucky in this game. Normally it's not that easy. The way that the hard knocks came out, also the traps came out at the end of the game when the deck was already exhausted. Also, of course, there's not much communication among the players allowed, so by me playing all 4 of them, I of course had an advantage. But nevertheless, I hopefully could show you that this game is A, very unique, and B, not hard to play once you've got the rules down. And hopefully you've also seen that while the game is very thematic, it is not about actively participating in the war. It's more about making it through there, using all the resources at your disposal to just, well, make it out alive. And like with other limited communication games, for example Hanabi, once you've played this multiple times with the same group, you'll learn to depend on each other, read each other's clues and signals, and that makes this an even better and more interesting experience. And I guess that's already it. So once again, thanks for watching, have fun playing, and until next time, bye bye.